This is actually something I hadn't heard. The 7 surprising things that turn a man off that can actually contribute to ED, which of course is a huge topic here on Second Act.
Did you push record?
Thanks so much for joining us again on Second Act TV. I'm happy that Robert Manny's staying after again for another segment talking love and relationships after 50. Robert, thanks so much for staying over.
Love it. Thanks, Silka.
Well, Robert, of course, is the author of the Guy's Guide to Love that every woman should read it if they want to know what men really think. And that's, of course, why we have you here. And we just finished a segment about an article I thought was interesting, the top 10 things that turn men off and on, especially as they age. And then there was an article that was linked to that I thought was really interesting. This is actually something I hadn't heard. The 7 surprising things that turn a man off that can actually contribute to ED, which of course is a huge topic here on Second Act. And we've done a lot of videos on that. Mostly it's a physiological and psychological problem, if you will. But maybe are you, the woman, are you doing something or is something happening that contributes to this? And we've never quite focused on that, so I want to get your opinion. The first, this was really interesting, is you're too buddy with his buds. Let me throw it over to you.
Well, that's interesting. The whole issue of ED, I think it would be rare to find a man who went through his entire life who made it happen every single time, regardless of how much he drank, how much stress he's under, who his partner was with. And there's all different types of factors. But number one, your largest sexual organ, everybody, is right here, as we know. Maybe not for me, but for most people, it's right here. And there's a lot of different factors. So I think when you get into too close to his friends, it's about insecurity. Mm-hmm. And if you're concerned that your female partner, is too close with your buddies, what are you afraid of? That she's going to start sleeping with them? I mean, what's the issue? If you're all friends, it shouldn't matter. But we're all human, so I guess if you find that your partner's flirting, as you see, I put it in quotes, with one of your friends more than others, and he happens to be a studly kind of guy or whatever, or very accomplished, that you'd be like a little concerned, like, oh, wow, maybe she digs him more than me. And can that get in his head when you get into the sack together? I guess it could happen. But I never thought that was the biggest concern. It hasn't been one for mine. Everybody's been jealous. Yeah. And jealous a little bit can be healthy. A lot of it is bad news. And this is a case where it becomes bad news because it affects your intimacy.
Well, I thought it was really interesting because this is actually, this was a study with 3,000 people, and the study is published in the American Journal of Sociology. So I hadn't heard that. I thought that was just an interesting thing to think about. Yeah. Okay, second one, you're hotter than he is.
Well, my wife's hotter than me, and that's a good thing. And I think that's, every guy wants his wife to be hotter than he is. So I don't see that as being a factor. If you're a man, I think you want your woman to be hotter than you. You want to be like, hey, look at what I got. She's terrific. She's beautiful. I think that's a really good thing. So again, it comes down to your feelings about your self-worth. And if you feel that she's more attractive than you are and all these guys are going to want her and you don't have the confidence that you can hold on to her, then, that's an issue. That's a confidence issue that you have. Yeah. So that would be my take on that.
Yeah. I when you said every man, in a way, I disagree with just a little bit, because I have seen men, very good looking men, who I would say, I wonder, you kind of just have that, they don't really match to where the woman wasn't. But I think it does go back to being insecure, and that causes stress, and that affects your cortisol levels. And that's what this study said. Again, interesting. I never thought that if You thought you're
Well,
too hot.
you bring up a great point because love is blind, and sometimes we see celebrities, whatever, and you're like, what is he doing with her or whatever? But it's not our business
Yeah.
because we have no control over chemistry. We have no idea what people do behind closed doors together and how they turn each other on. And haven't you ever been surprised when you were in your dating days, you're dating somebody and like you didn't think that they were that hot or anything, and then you got into under the sheets and like, whoa, this is good. And we always get, that's why to keep an open mind. We get these nice surprises. So we really don't want to judge other people about, who their partner is and who's hotter and all of that. But I think for the most part, and I think you were right to correct me, Silka, is that men want to be proud of their partner. I think that's the point. It's not about she's hotter than me, but I can tell you, I remember when I was dating my wife and we went to an event and we were walking down the street in New York and guys were yelling out the window and stuff. And I'm like, I'm glad that she's so hot, but do I really want to listen to this all the time? And we had just started dating, but I figured, yeah, okay, I'll listen to it.
That's
It's
funny.
better than that they were catcalling in the opposite way, like, hey, you look, what are you doing with her?
That's funny. Well, again, I thought it was really interesting that that was listed as a contributing, possible contributing factor to ED. The next one, and I kind of get this. This I hadn't heard it again attributed to this, but you went overboard on the eau de cologne or perfume. I get that. A really strong scent like that totally turns me off. Of course, I mean, how does that work for men? Do you agree with that? Something to think about?
Uh, Well, I think everybody, it's like a human thing. Like everybody has their own taste. So what might turn one man on might turn another one off. And the sense that women like sometimes are more feminine and they're not trying to arouse a guy sexually by their scent. Maybe they just like the scent and that's certainly their prerogative. And so that's just to me, that's just personal taste. I wouldn't list it in my list of like, if I was with someone and she wore a scent that I really didn't like,
Yeah.
if I was close enough with her, I might mention, a scent that I liked or buy her something or whatever, but try to shift that because, you don't want, and I'm sure the woman doesn't want to turn the guy off by the scent that she's wearing. So it's personal
Yeah,
taste.
apparently it's a touchy topic and something to think about. It can actually cause allergy attacks and like what you said, you don't how do you don't want to insult somebody or maybe,
Sure.
yeah. So anyway,
Hmm.
if you're having issues with ED, is there perfume involved? I don't know.
Right.
This one makes sense too. You're a snorer.
Well, listen, nobody wants to be next to somebody that's snoring. I'm not saying it's a turn off, but it's a physical ailment, if you will, quote unquote. And whether if you're a guy, you don't want to be next to a woman snoring. If you're a woman, you don't want to be next to a guy snoring who sounds like a grizzly bear. So that's something that there are things that can be done, but it's not the person's fault if they snore because they don't know they're snoring. So is it a turn on? Of course, it's not a turn on. Is it a major thing? Is it breakup? Is it a deal breaker? I don't think it's a deal breaker. I just think it's something where unless she or she snores all the time, then it's like, okay, am I going to be okay with this? You got to ask yourself, and it may seem like a minor thing, but if it's all the time, then you got to either say, okay, we have to address this
Hmm.
because there are things that can be done,
Right.
or just say, no, I can't deal with it. But that's, to me, it's not that big a deal. It's something that's fixable.
Yeah, it is fixable. It is listed, however, in other research that I did as a huge destroyer of
Mm.
relationships. That snoring
I,
is attributed to that.
wow, that's interesting. I think the next one, Silka, pick fights unnecessarily, is much more important,
Yeah.
and I would push that like up to number two, if you will, because certain people have it's just a personality thing. Where some people I know with my wife, if she sometimes she'll want to get into something, and I'm like, I'm not. This is not a big enough thing to argue about. I hear you, okay, but I don't want to argue about it. And sometimes people want to talk about stuff, and there's certain things that you want to talk about, and then guys a lot of times get talked out like this is how I feel about it, and I don't have anything else to add. You can't. There's nothing else to work it around. And if it's a specific issue like you leave the refrigerator door open unintentionally too much. At a certain point, how much more you got to say about it? You could say, okay, I'll do a better job. I'm sorry. That's it. But these are the little things that happen in any relationship where that can become bigger problems because then you have to say, well, where is this coming from? And I'm not pointing at my wife by any means, but people have to find the right fights.
Right.
So if you feel like, oh, we're going to get in an argument about something that I think is nothing, well, it must be important to the other person. So I think people have to do a better job, particularly men need to do a better job, like listening and paying attention, and then preemptively eliminating those things that could create arguments. But nobody wants to be with somebody who looks for arguments.
Right. No, I
That's no
agree.
fun.
I agree. And this is something that I really had to learn because, like you said, there's always something else. Because my ex-husband and I mean, I got into a habit. I was just there was just so much resentment and everything. I would pick fights. And that, I did.
Why would you do that?
Because I was pissed. I mean, it wasn't, I'm not saying it was right. I'm saying this is something there where I had to learn, I worked on
It was an
myself.
outpouring of reason. It was an outward articulation of your resentment.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, anytime you did something that just, something little, really the small stuff, I would pick fights. And I see other women doing that. And this is something I worked on really hard so I don't bring that to another relationship. I think it's a good point. Think about that. Are you bringing that to your relationship, and is it necessary?
That's a great point. And I think for the men out there, they need to realize that it's not really about the minor issue. It's about something bigger than that.
Exactly.
So I guess my wife really hates me. That's what it is.
That's funny. And then this is interesting too, and it's so important. You brush off his blues, his bad moods, or his depression is what it leads to. That you don't acknowledge depression, and that is something that definitely can lead to. Depression can lead to erectile dysfunction.
Depression is a specific malady, and that has to be addressed separately. But if it's just about if he wants to talk about something and you're not empathetic, that's a problem because he feels like he can't. Women often say they want the guy to open up more, be more emotionally available, and then if he wants to be and you don't want to hear it, that creates a insecurity in him, and that like, well, I thought a confusion. I thought we were going to talk about stuff like this. I'm doing a good thing, but it's not. It's a bad thing, and then that could be a deal breaker because eventually a guy could say she just doesn't get me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and they say here, and this is an important, a good point, is that if the man comes from a traditional, or goes by the traditional gender roles, guy always has to be tough. That is something that definitely will squash, your
or the woman has that impression that the guy has to be tough. Like some ladies like the macho guy, and like they're not looking for the feelings. They want the protection and security, and like, he's my big man. And I get it. Everybody's different. Everybody finds what works for them. But that could be the case also.
Yeah. Again, interesting point to have that in the context of erectile dysfunction. Lastly, they list you try to fix him. This compulsion to fix him because he isn't good enough.
Yeah, that's again about that breeds a lack of self-confidence. And to me, as we started with, the biggest issue with ED is probably a lack of confidence in being able to do it, to make it happen. And that could cross a lot of different categories, but can be communicated via the lack of sexual performance. So I think we don't want to be kid gloves around our male partners, but we want to make sure that we, boost them up at the right time from the heart, not being phony about it. But if you go into bed with a guy, if he's your partner, you love him. You would hope that and you want him to be his very best in every way, and you're rooting for him. So if you keep that in mind and don't just put it on him like, okay, make it happen, buddy. It takes two to tango, and it should be fun. So. But I'm making a generalization because there are issues and people have it, and it's not the end of the world. And obviously, there's things that people can take and things, but the psychological part of it, we can help it or we can hurt it. If you keep positive, if you communicate, and you're in touch, not just emotionally in touch, but physically in touch also, making your partner feel good is a good step towards making the relationship work from an intimacy standpoint.
Right. Well, we're coming to the end of the segment. I want to leave one thing, and I'll let you close. We're talking about something, somewhat frivolous when it comes to erectile dysfunction. I thought it was interesting. One thing I want to make sure we leave our viewers with is that erectile dysfunction can be indicative of something going on, something more serious going on with you physiologically. So the first thing, if you do, if your partner, if you have erectile dysfunction, do go see your physician and make sure that there isn't anything deeper going on. And with that, Robert, what would you like to add?
Well, I would agree with you completely. We don't want to be frivolous about erectile dysfunction. It is a real thing. But just, again, I don't think anybody has batted 1,000 their entire life. So, if something happens where the guy has too much to drink, or he's too stressed out, or whatever, or he doesn't like your cologne, he's just not into it. Guys can have a headache too. So let's not put too much pressure on the guy. Make it fun. And I think things can, in most cases, work out. And of course, there are clinical issues with erectile dysfunction where the physician needs to get involved, and there's meds and etc.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Robert, for being so open and honest, as you always are, giving us this great information, what women need to know and what men think. We'll link to all of your information, as usual, to your book, to your podcast, and look forward to having you back soon on Second Act TV.
Thank you, Silke. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. If you haven't already done so, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. The button is right over here. Just click on through to YouTube. When you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too. We'll notify you every time we start a new video. See you next time.